Well, this month, Twitter confirmed to Forbes.com that it could kick President Trump off the platform for repeated violations of its user policy when he loses his world leader status. It's just the latest shot across the bow in an ongoing fight between tech giants and conservatives. To take a closer look, we bring in our panel. Will Chamberlain is the senior counsel for the Internet Accountability Project, and Kenny Cunningham is the founder of Cunningham Communications. Welcome, both of you, to the show. Will, I want to start with you. Like him or not, President Trump is a legitimate newsmaker, one of the 45 people elected president of these United States. How can Twitter justify removing his voice from their environment, even though he really is in many ways the Twitter president and chief?
Well, the real problem is that they don't have to justify it. Section 230 gives them basically carte blanche to remove people who remove people as long as they do so in, quote, good faith. And that's a very, very broad standard for material that's merely objectionable. And given that President Trump has spent, a decade building up a platform of something like 80 million users, the idea that he would be able to be kicked off despite all that labor and all that effort that went into it, it says a lot not only about what they can do to Trump, but what they can do to anybody else. And we need to start taking a look at making the laws so that people's efforts and labor that they put into these social media platforms, that in many cases build them up and build up their value, that they can't just be taken away on a whim.
And Kenny, to that point, when you start talking about the work that people put into building a social media presence, the president notwithstanding, what does it say right now, and what are the implications for the thought process that we could end up in a place where people are here today and gone tomorrow?
Well, the implications are terrible. But let's take a step back here and think about, because obviously Twitter's done a lot of good for Donald Trump, but Donald Trump, let's be honest, has done a lot of good for Twitter. In social media, at the time Twitter came around, we knew about AOL chat rooms, MySpace, and then Facebook was obviously on the rise. There was nothing like Twitter. They were an innovator in the space. Donald Trump latched onto Twitter in 2009 and realizing he could use it as a tremendous platform to inevitably launch his political career. He was a significant part of its rise in popularity in the early 2010s. He's had over 58,000 tweets since, and he is one of the biggest contributors to Twitter's success. And also think about this. Twitter has gotten so much earned media from him. But even before he was president, he would tweet something and it would be on the nightly news. And when they wouldn't report it, Donald Trump would subvert the media, the mainstream media, in order to get his message across, which in turn enhanced engagement because people knew they could go to Twitter to see information that wasn't being reported on. And so as much as this, affects Donald Trump, I think it affects Twitter more in their business model.
Right. Now, Will, I'll come to you because, the crux of all this comes down to the showdown over Section 230. In many ways, it led to the precipitous rise of the social media, Web 2.0, whatever you want to call it, that has created the modern internet as we know it. How do we split the baby here? How do we parse the necessity for us to make sure that the companies that are benefiting from Section 230 are abiding by the spirit of the law, but at the same time providing protections to individuals that would seek to unseat these tech giants to make sure that they have the same pathway to success?
I think the way to view it is to use the First Amendment as your guideline. Even if the First Amendment doesn't apply to private companies by its terms, it provides the basic spirit for what we think of as free speech. So parts of Section 230 give platforms an incentive to allow people to speak on their platforms without being too concerned about liability. I think we should be more respectful of those protections because we don't want the companies to get scared and be scared of what people post, especially if it means that they're just always banning, lawful speech. But when it comes to removing people from their platform because of their political views, or doing things like they did to the New York Post, where they censored a story based on a hacked materials policy that they never even provided evidence was violated. We should look at that very, very skeptically. And in a sense, we should be looking to reform Section 230 in a way that protects users' right to lawful speech and eliminates the liability protection for these companies when they ban people for political reasons.
Right, and to that point, Kenny, you have people, platforms like Parler that are coming up, platforms like Rumble that are coming up, people who are trying to innovate in this space. What is the pathway forward for them, and what is the responsibility of conservatives writ large who want to be able to make sure that their voices are being heard and not censored, to make sure that we can have a prosperous ecosystem that speaks to their needs?
It's a great point. 230 is the start of that. But I'll tell you what, if Twitter bans Trump or even continues to censor his posts, I would not be surprised at all if Trump organizes other conservative leaders to form a mass exodus coalition from the platform and takes a large swath of his 74 million voters with him. And then keep in mind, Twitter has 68 million monthly active users and only 36 million daily. So, like, Parler is the most well-known viable alternative, but I would not be surprised if Trump were to link back up with folks like Brad Parscale, who is a digital media guru and has more information and data on Trump supporters than anyone, to start a new platform. And I think it's healthy. I think, the space needs more competition, not just in Twitter, but big tech at large. And so I think it would be good for the environment. More competition breeds better services to consumers.
Right. Well, specifically, we talk about Facebook, we talk about Google. Those are the elephants in the room. There's obviously lawsuits pending right now from attorneys generals across this country talking about antitrust issues. Yeah, walk us through that a little bit, because this is no longer your Rockefeller antitrust cases where you're breaking up big oil and everyone gets richer in the process. How do you go back to get these companies to perhaps divest of properties that the federal government gave them permission to acquire in the first place?
I mean, well, you point out that they're violating the antitrust laws, and you do so with a lawsuit. And it's not just merely about they have bought, for example, Facebook buying Instagram or Google buying some of its competitors. It's about getting rid of some of these illegal tying arrangements that they have. I mean, Google has leveraged its market power in search to get market power and dominant monopolies in basically every part of online advertising. From being the people who, they're the broker for online ads. They're the representative of the people who want to publish advertising, and they're the representative of the people who also want to offer advertising on their websites. So, I mean, that's just an incredible monopoly. And, for people who talk about the value of the free market and competition, antitrust law is what ensures that the free market and competition really exists. So I think that especially for those people who say that the free market is a solution to things like censorship, they have to be for these antitrust challenges to ensure that free market exists and is not dominated by monopolies.
We'll have to take a look on that. But Will Chamberlain, Kenny Cunningham, thanks so much for joining us.